Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Dr. Geraldine Magennis. Hi, Geraldine. How are you?
Hi, Kieran.
It's fantastic to have you here. And we're going to explore how we can support new and beginning teachers in their professional development. But I thought it might make sense to begin with a bit about who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Well, Kieran, I teach here in St Mary's University College in Belfast. I started out as a primary school teacher in the north of the city, and then I got the bug to wander, and I went to the States, to California, for a year to teach, and then I came back, and after teaching for a little while, then back in my old school, I took time out to do a postgraduate degree, and then I got into third level 20 years ago. So I teach here in the college. I started out in education with a little literacy, but a few years ago I moved into literacy full time, which is really, really what I wanted to do, and I'm very grateful that I got the opportunity to do that. And then a couple of years back, in 17 to 19, I was teaching in a US university, teaching literacy all the time, which was lovely. So I teach undergraduate degree, I teach postgraduate degree, and more recently, I've been reaching out to teachers in schools much more. So a full plate, but I'm very happy to have it.
Is it like in American universities? Because obviously, I don't know if they're slightly different. Obviously, they're geared towards certain
Mm-hmm.
aspects like sports and things like that. There is it much the same in terms of the education they receive and stuff?
Um, it's it's quite different in the sense that one of the things that struck me at the start was you have so much autonomy when it comes to what you teach, which is great in that you get to do what you feel is the right thing to do, but also coming in, parachuting in as a new person to the system, and to that it was a private university. You really are all at sea. And the students take modules in a very different way than they do here. Certainly in that university, it seemed to be, here it's very linear in the college I teach in that you know what first to fourth year looks like, and you know the modules and the concentration as they talk about. Whereas out there, it was very much more of a patchwork quilt to get you to where you needed to go. I really loved it. But what I would say is it's not for the faint-hearted, because things can change like that, in a moment, and you just have to be ready to change with it. But a fabulous experience.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds fascinating. I mean,
Mm.
we've almost got this. I don't know, was it 6 degrees of separation situation? Because obviously you're big into your literacy. We're talking to Chris Such, and little did he know that you'd actually been my tutor way back when I went to university. I'm not going to say when.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, Chris came on to a book study last year that I did on his book, The Art and Science of Teaching Primary Reading. And he was so generous. He came for the last session, and he was fabulous. And that's the beauty of what you're doing here, Kieran, is, reaching out and joining those dots, because that's the way you get business done nowadays.
Yeah, and it's great to sort of see that the place where I went to university is thinking about the kind of things that I think that I value in education. That gives
Hmm.
me an immense sense of pride, and also you're part of the team. I know you're quite self-deprecating in terms of how much input you have, but you've got your own podcast at
Hmm.
St Mary's where you're exploring sort of professional development.
Hmm. Yes, I'm sort of the third wheel there, I have to say. Karen McGivern and Frances Burgess are the two big movers and shakers there. But I'm really delighted, because I think that's the way education is now, and I'm really pleased that it is. And I have to say, Kieran, when I picked up that you were doing this podcast, I'm thrilled, because I am a theory literacy practice nerd, and I make no apology for it, because it is so exciting, and it gets a bad rap. So when I saw someone like yourself doing the work you do, I thought this is just amazing. It's fabulous, and I would highly encourage it. So thank you for the invitation.
No, my pleasure. And I think yeah, nerds is probably the best way to describe the those of us who do this on a regular basis. Yeah, Yes, I mean, so part of that, I mean, you had some really interesting conversations on your podcast. You have like a student as well as members of the sort of faculty and stuff, and so I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about how we support those new and beginning teachers, you know, right at the start of their careers. Because I can't really remember when I got this sort of evidence informed bug, but I'm sure it must have been early on.
Mhm.
What do
Mhm.
you think the main challenges and opportunities for new and beginning teachers are at the beginning of their CPD journey?
Well, I think, Kieran, it's no big surprise that overwhelm is the first big challenge. Um, you're going out into the world, and really, in many ways, you've been fairly closeted to that point, because you have your tutors there who know you pretty well. You're certainly in this college, it's a very community based atmosphere. And then you're tossed out into the world where you have a whole new set of line managers. And even that phrase, line managers, the implication is now you are responsible and you are getting paid for the job you do. It's not about assignments. It's about the big assignment, which is teaching, teaching the children in front of you. You've got new colleagues and you've got parents attached. Wasn't that a shock to everybody, no matter when you come out into teaching? And I suppose you're accountable for the first time, unlike any other accountability you've ever experienced. And I always say to the students, you will remember the first belligerent parent you meet. And that's no judgment on the parent. They are where they are. They're going through what they're going through. And you happen just to get it full force, if they're unhappy about something or they're stressed about something. So that's a huge challenge and a culture shock, because maybe you're moving to a different country, a different town, a different culture. And you just have to get with the program. I mean, talking there about teaching in Indiana, I mean, I've been around the block and I thought at least I know some stuff to get me started. I didn't. It was a huge culture shock. It's a very conservative Midwestern state with all that comes with that in a private religious university. So, coming out at 18 with that, or 18 to 22, that's overwhelming, for anyone. So I suppose the other overwhelming things are, where do you begin? Where do you begin in your teaching and where do you begin in developing yourself? Because immediately most of us think, I'm not prepared. College didn't teach me this. College can only touch the sides of what you need to know. But, what demands your attention first? So it's juggling all of those kinds of challenging ideas of, I know I need to do a lot, but where do I start? And how do I prevent myself from becoming overwhelmed? Because that's the one thing that really brings us to our knees. It's like cleaning the house. You look at everything that needs to be cleaned and then you sit down and have a cup of tea because you can't think about where to begin. A few other things that I think are the big challenges, and you've talked there about the evidence-based bug. How do you know that what you are accessing is evidence-based and value for money? It's a very big marketplace out there now, and social media is fabulous in many ways. But how do you know what is good, what is mediocre, and what is downright dangerous in terms of doing a job that is so important as educating children? And are you being ripped off? Is it too dear? Is cheap necessarily good? Is free necessarily good? Where do you get the finances to support what you want to do? I mean, you're probably coming out of college already with debt, paying off your debts. Do you necessarily have the cash there to add to that, even though you're hungry to develop yourself? And the last two little points, which are very general, but really, I think, make a huge demand on us, is juggling the daily job with wanting to develop yourself. We have to get in there and teach the children or the students in front of us. But the challenge is, how do I do that knowing where some of the gaps are and knowing that I want to do this better and do this differently, but not having the time maybe to consult with others or study further? How do I maintain that work-life balance? And we talk about it all the time. I mean, that's the big phrase now, isn't it? Get a work-life balance. But how do you do that from the front end as opposed to crashing and burning and having someone pick up the pieces after? Two maybe more recent things that I think have become challenges. You're probably familiar, Kieran, with the expression edutainment. And I think the challenge is working against that cultural expectation that edutainment equals good education. It doesn't necessarily. And that's that sort of tension between how can I be a popular teacher who's a fun teacher, who's an impactful teacher. And that can feel like a real challenge, so that everybody wants to be liked. But our job is to be effective over and above anything else. And finally, there's that need to resist, I suppose, the widespread idea that you must be excellent now. And I would say, what's the rush? There is no need for what I call vertical liftoff. You know, when an aircraft is taking off like that, it's in an emergency situation, you're under pressure, as opposed to the slow burn. You know, start now and get better over time, because it's a hugely demanding career, but you have lots of time.
I think that's a great analogy. You know, I was watching the Apollo 13. There's a new documentary about it, and they obviously do the vertical lift off, don't they, when they send rockets into space? And I think they had a wild number had exploded in the months leading up to the actual launch and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like that, and I think you're outlining some of the things some of the things that are have we've spoken about in the podcast in the past and almost had to learn the hard way,
Mm-hmm.
because I think we've got it certainly feels like we've got a better understanding of what works and how to be critical, or justly
Mm-hmm.
critical of the messages that are sent our way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you saying to your students? Are you just saying, like, be aware and, like, take everything as it comes, or are they leaning on their sort of more experienced peers once they go out into the workplace?
I suppose, Kieran, the problem I face is that I am very honest with the students, and I'm in a sense trying to put old heads on young shoulders. Because I know what it's like to work in education for a long time, and exhilarating as it is, it also is a very scary place, in that um, the first podcast we did last year on the Education Exchange podcast here in St Mary's, I talked about burnout because I had burnt out, and I went to the States to refresh myself in the 90s. And that is a very frightening place to find yourself, when you love the job, but you feel it's killing you. And so I try to be very honest with the students and be forward looking into the real classroom, the real world, because it's easy to, when you're sitting in a college, it's easy to become directed mainly by, well, what is my assignment? What are my grades? What is my classification? And of course, those are very important things, and I wouldn't negate those for a moment. But it's trying to give them that reality shot and say, okay, not to scare the socks off them and say, everything's awful out there and pressured, but to say, okay, how do we apply this to the classroom? And what are the pitfalls? What's the reality? As far as we can do it whilst looking from the outside in. And yes, they do draw on each other, which is very good. But later I will go on to chat a little bit about, what's our benchmark for assessing what's good and what's not so good. Because we can measure whatever we want with whatever we want, but we have to make sure we're using the right yardstick to measure whatever it is we are assessing as being our situation.
I think that makes a whole lot of sense. Are there any opportunities in there for those beginning teachers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure my students would be horrified for me to say I wish I was 30 years younger and starting in teaching. They would say, absolutely not. We're getting rid of her after, we're getting away from her after 4 years. We don't want her out there along with us. First of all, they have youth on their side, which is brilliant. So, they have the energy and the enthusiasm, and most of all, I hope, the curiosity. And that's fabulous. I mean, any school or organization, that's what they want. So the opportunity to use all of that in a productive way is great. Another opportunity is they're coming out with fresh ideas and connections to offer the school. So whatever the school can give them, they are equally giving in terms of, hopefully they're coming out of institutions that are up to date with the research and the practice. They're coming out with connections, with resources, And so they have the opportunity to lead in that way, or certainly to lead alongside, of course, whomever they meet. So that's, and there's a huge area for growth. I meet students all the time, and they're very quickly into middle management and posts of responsibility. Now, I wouldn't say to do that too quickly, but what I'm saying is they have the opportunity there to grow into those positions, which is fabulous. They also now, because they have children in front of them and a little bit of experience behind them, they have the opportunity, as you were saying earlier, Kieran, to be critical in their stance about the real world of education with young children. And much as that's hard work, it's also fabulous work, because now you can sort of shape and refine. And, I say to the students in first year, you've just had a baby. It's called your career. I can be a midwife to help you with it, as will any other tutor and host teacher or school, but we can't raise that baby for you. We can help you with it. And that's what being critical is. It's taking whatever you are given and then sort of measuring that up against your experience and what you read in terms of the theory and what you see in terms of the practice. So that is a fabulous opportunity to really grow through. And I suppose one of the biggest opportunities that wasn't the case when I came out of college 1,000 years ago, but it's the use of technology and social media. And using that to their advantage, but I would caution that not to be sucked in by those on social media who present as being light and fluffy in education, but don't have substance. I hope there's no one watching this or listening to this going, and she's the very one. But the idea of, you follow people who say all the right things, who say all of those general platitudes, you feel inspired and it goes nowhere. Or worse still, it's not really good sound advice, but it feels warm and fuzzy. So the opportunity there is to be critical, to use social media and technology, but to do it in a way that you are measuring it against a really sound research base. So there's lots of opportunities and excitement out there.
Lord knows that there's plenty of vacuous aphorisms out there on social media. I mean, have you made the switch over to Blue Sky yet?
No, I haven't. You see, there you've caught me out, Kieran. What's that?
It's basically Twitter, but before it got taken over, and so there's no advertisements, and it's a lot easier to find those voices. I've certainly, I don't even know if I haven't actually potentially released many of the episodes where we talk about this, but essentially it's the team who used to run Twitter, and they've made it very, very similar. And so I'm enjoying connecting with people, actually listening to what they have to say about education. Whereas for a long time that sort of slipped by the wayside.
Kieran, that's brilliant. You see, this is what I mean about connecting with each other, because I'm really seeking out content, people with good substance and content, because I think you can learn the technology, to a greater or lesser degree, but it's the content. And, students are always listening to me talking about content. And the thing is, we're there for the content. It doesn't matter how you deliver it. The point is, it must be good stuff that you're delivering. So it's always good to connect with people who know what they're talking about.
They've got this thing where you can make these like starter packs for people, and someone made one for the Research Ed conference at the weekend. It was the national conference on Saturday, and with one click of a button, I was able to follow everybody who was on that list, and so then that sort of extended my network.
Brilliant. You talked about 6 degrees of separation. It's true. I mean, it's fabulous. It's just being cautious as to who you are connected to, but you get to know the names very quickly who are worth following.
How can new and beginning teachers access high quality CPD that meets both their needs and their interests?
Well, this kind of extends just the conversation we had there a second ago. I would say look for the big names in the field who are solidly rooted in current research in whatever aspect of practice you're interested in developing. Now, I know being in third level, people probably rightfully think, oh, she's a theory nerd. There's really no point in killing yourself in a classroom or a school if you're doing stuff that's ineffective. I mean, that's madness. That's just madness, and it's detrimental to the children you teach. So the research really does matter, and the research that you're following needs to be robust. So I would say look for the big names in the field. And just as you were saying there, Kieran, you come to know who the eminent people are, who have really done the hard yards and have done the robust research. I'm not talking about twinkly stuff on TikTok or things like that. I'm not saying that everything on TikTok is twinkly, and I'm not on TikTok, so that's one less twinkle. But it's stuff. The people whose pedigree you can trust, but don't just follow those, as I say, who are inspiring with little substance. Now, one word I really dislike is the word guru, because you could be a guru on Friday and then you fall out of favor over the weekend, and suddenly you're being burned at the stake on Monday, because the research has been upgraded and changed. And a good measure of whether this person is really delivering the goods is they last beyond that initial inspirational dopamine hit. Where you go to a conference and somebody has riled you up and you're skipping back to your class thinking, wow, I'm going to change the world. And then suddenly you realize, I don't actually have anything to bring back that is solid, that where I can, even begin to upgrade my work, my development. The other thing I would say is, and this is really important, is to explore the accessible theory yourself. Because sometimes we look to other people to develop us, So I am a complete literacy nerd, and I make no apology for that. But getting into what I call the theory into practice books, they're very much American orientated, but I've always found that the American market is very good at taking the theory, making it accessible, and then really showing you how to put it into practice. I think here we do the theory well. I think we do the resources well. It's that bridge over between the two. So, in the college here, we would use a lot of that sort of theory so that we have instant practice to draw on. So, if you're in teaching, it is your obligation, in my view, to develop yourself. So I'm not saying that everybody has loads of time to read volumes of books, but to, listen to webinars and podcasts, and, get a little bit here and there and keep building up your knowledge base. And for example, here in the North, we have the Education Authority's Page Turners, which is a series of focused webinars that are free. Now, last semester, I was part of one on reading for pleasure. This semester, it's going to be on language teaching, as in, I think it's foreign languages. So there's lots out there if you really want to access the stuff. But again, be very judicious in what you choose. And as far as possible, try not to splay your focus. Now, this is really hypocritical of me because I want to absorb it all. So if you can, maybe say you've chosen something like in the field of literacy, somebody might say, I really want to look at vocabulary building. So to seek out and build up your repertoire with that is really important. I know that we have a problem that here in the North, we have very little CPD, and it's sporadic. And schools are maybe buying in stuff from elsewhere. I would always caution the students to remember, and to teachers I work with, remember it has to be reconfigured for the North of Ireland, and not to adopt other countries' or other locations' problems and try to address them here. We have similar ones in some cases, but we also have unique ones. So we don't need to solve somebody else's problem. Again, it's that critical side. And I suppose this may be slightly controversial about accessing high quality CPD. I would say hold off on doing postgraduate qualifications in the first couple of years. And what I mean by that is you have enough pressure on yourself entering the profession. And remember, you've just paid for and worked yourself really hard to get one degree. Make it work for you. Why would you want another one immediately when you are already trying to figure out how to use the first one you got. So go out there and, certainly in a couple of years' time, if you want to go on and do, a master's or whatever you want to do, I'm not discouraging you from doing that. But you want something to talk about, to read about, to write about, to discuss, to think about that class that you taught, and you could go in and, write it up in your dissertation, or that problem that you've been following around for a couple of years, and that's going to be your thesis. So, there's all the time in the world to do that. Just, make your first degree work for you really well. So that's what I would say, Kieran, for trying to access what it is that you feel you need in your development.
I always imagine like a graph with knowledge and mileage on each of the axes. And there's almost like this sweet spot where you've got enough to think about and real life experience. And also the first couple of years of your teaching are just getting a handle on how you behave with small children as your sole responsibility and stuff. So I think that's really wise.
Yeah. And I think we live in a world where it's instantaneous. We should be off and running and Olympic style, we need to be out there ahead of the field. And I'm thinking when I see young people going out, and maybe I'm on teaching placement and they come up to me and they've been out 5 or 6 years, and the one thing I love to hear is I love for them to say, Geraldine, I'm still in teaching and I love it. Even on my hardest days, I feel job done then. Why give yourself more pressure in the first couple of years of your profession to do yet more study? At a high level, I'm talking about a high committed level. There's time for that further down the road.
What are some effective strategies and tools for new and beginning teachers to reflect on their practice and identify their own areas for development? Because that's really important.
I would say start with auditing what you have already achieved and feel that you do well in regards to your planning and provision. Because it's very easy, and I'm no different than anyone else, it's very easy to think I'm starting from scratch. College is one thing, and now I'm in the real world, and those two things will never meet. And the old adage, college didn't teach me that. College isn't going to teach you everything. Those who are cute enough will go, I don't expect college to teach me everything, but I expect them to teach me to think. I expect them to be able to challenge me to, if I'm in a tight spot and I'm not sure about this curriculum, this piece of curriculum, I'm not sure about this pedagogy or whatever, I have to figure out in between how I make these things work with their help. So that when I go out into a school, I can do the same in situ with the help of those who are with me. So I joke with the students and I say, folks, I won't be affirming. I'm not paid to affirm all of your thinking. I am paid to disturb your thinking. You mightn't like it, but that's to try and bridge that gap so that when they do go out, they feel, okay, I have some smarts with me and now I have to apply them to the new context. So start by auditing. And certainly here in St. Mary's, what I would say is we do a career entry profile at the end of 4th year. So they've really collated everything. It's almost like a CV. And they've really reviewed what they've done over the 4 years and go back to that and say, okay, I'm not starting at the starting line. So what can I do? And what did I do on my previous teaching practices? What was the feedback from the host teachers, from the managers, from the tutors? What can I take forward into my new position? And, where can I, as you talked about that sweet spot, Kieran, where can I sort of intersect those two things and say, I'm starting in September with a P2 class. What can I bring to the party? And you feel less empty and overwhelmed starting a new job if you can do that. Again, it's parsing out the effective practice as opposed to, well, I'll just do busy work to get started. And that can be a hard call. So auditing would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is prioritize any aspect of your provision that you feel will bring you the biggest bang for your buck in the first instance. And I'm not talking here about what's trendy and in vogue. You individually will know what you struggle with. And no one can really do that for you. Now, we can do lessons, as individuals, we can do lessons that look good on the outside, but somewhere down the line, you are going to be formally observed by your peers and management. They will see through that, you know. And so I would say be honest and upfront with yourself first and decide on where you want to what you want to prioritize. And it means that when you go out to choose that CPD, wherever you get it, you can do it in such a way that you know it will sharpen your knowledge base. That is a huge thing. You need to know stuff to be able to do stuff. So that'll help sharpen your knowledge base, refine your teaching, and deepen the children's learning, because that is ultimately what we are here for. And that's hard, and seek help with that with your colleagues. And what I would say then finally for this is, once you've done your homework, so if I feel that maybe, I'm not great at classroom management or whatever it is, then I can do a little bit of homework, do a little bit of reading around the subject, or go back to find out what I have been learning about it in college, and consult with colleagues and managers about that area, so that when you go to whoever is the teacher tutor for new teachers, you're not sort of going blankly and saying, I don't know what to do. They are busy people. So go with your ideas and say, over and above whatever the school prioritizes, this is what I feel I'm really wanting to develop, or I'm struggling a little bit with. These are organizations that I have talked to. This is some of the reading I've been doing. This is some of the people I've been listening to online. Come with a little sort of party bag of stuff, so that that person in management doesn't feel, oh my gosh, this person's like dead wood. They may as well be back in college in second year or first year, so that you are offering them something, and you're showing willingness and you're showing initiative, so that you can then maybe hopefully work something together to say, okay, well, I know somebody who might be able to help you there, or whatever. So those would be the kinds of things I would say maybe might be useful, Kieran.
I think at the start of your career, that almost helps to bridge the efficacy enthusiasm gap, because if you are taking things and saying, "Oh, could we work on this with," let's say, it would have been my NQT mentor, yeah, would have been NQT, yeah, that's what it used to be called. It's been so long, or your ECT mentor now, and as long as you were going with stuff, it didn't matter if you were perhaps pretty ineffectual in the classroom. At least you were showing willingness to improve, and because everyone knows that
Yeah.
it's a steep incline at the start of the journey.
Absolutely. I mean, I always say if someone is willing and they're, I will work with them as long as they are interested and they want to make, I can plod along with someone who is making slow but sure progress, because I see they're going in the right direction and they're telling me where they need to be led to next. And that's great. It's when you have someone who thinks that the college is going to make them a teacher, that the school is going to make them a better teacher, that if they got to a different school, if they got another degree, they'd be a better teacher. And it's all of these ifs, as opposed to, I am raising this baby called my career, and I'm just plugging into all of these different people and organizations who can help me. It's not their job to do it for me.
Now, over here in England, we almost, we have to try and get as many people as possible who want to teach to that point of efficacy. That's not what I remember Northern Ireland being like. I remember there were jobs were at a premium. Is that sort of the lay of the land at the minute, or what sort of world are new teachers going into when they leave the college?
Well, as I said earlier, a lot of our teachers go off to the Middle East and Australia, and actually a lot of, as far as I'm aware, a lot of folk had been coming over from the likes of England to sort of headhunt our young people, which is a great compliment. I would hear a lot of young people saying, look, I can't get a full-time job. They're subbing out there, and I'm not 100% about the situation, but I think there is work, but it depends on what it is you're prepared to do for that work. Some are quite happy to go to London and give it a year or 2 years. Some don't want to be away from home, and so what they'll do is they'll stay around home and sub. Some don't want a full-time job, and lots then go on into further education, into postgraduate study. So yes, there is a demand obviously to get them to efficacy, but I think it's a really important balance because I think it's a real injustice to hoodwink a young person into thinking that they are at a level of efficacy, and then we throw them out into a classroom where it just destroys them. They're absolutely minced by this machine called education. And I think that is I think that's something that every institution has to have an eye toward, because yes, of course, we need numbers in order to stay in employment and in order to fill the employment gap. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we're not putting people into the profession who are just not right for it, not ready for it, or just couldn't cope with it at this time. We'll do our best to make sure we get them there, though.
Part of me wishes someone from Australia had come to my career stage rather than the fourth year, because people from the north coast of Kent came and really sold me on it.
And look at your life hasn't been better. It has never been better since, Kieran.
How can new and beginning teachers collaborate with other teachers, mentors, and even experts to enhance their professional development?
When I thought about this question, Kieran, I suppose I thought of myself, because in the sense of myself and other teachers and educators, we're in the same position as though we're new, in the sense that there's so little CPD out there. So my first suggestion is build a community of practice, start a grassroots movement. I say that when I'm out in schools because, as far as I know, no one is coming with a bag of money and CPD to help us. It's just not there. And that's not a criticism of the system. That is just a reality of the system. And so I would say, connections with other people. And I know when you're coming out at the age of 22 or whatever, it is frightening to think, oh my gosh, this principal has been in the school, 15 years, or this teacher has taught P3 for 17 years. And who am I to come in and connect? Teachers want connection. It can be a lonely trek, even in the busiest of organizations. So if you're coming in and, you are willing to make connection, I would say very few people would turn that down. Ask to observe other practitioners in action, but go with a humility to say, look, I really want to get better at this. I want to look particularly at, it's how to teach maths, practical maths or mental maths or whatever it happens to be. So, if you don't ask, you'll never find out. Is it possible to maybe observe practitioners in action? And by return, obviously, you will be observed, and to try and take that feedback in the spirit in which it is intended. That's assuming the person who's observing you intends it well. So I would say, if you go and you have an observation coming up, be really prepared to say, look, this is what I've planned out, and these are maybe the areas that I would love feedback on. I think if I was observing someone and they were proactive like that, I would be saying, here's someone who's at the match. Here's someone who is really serious about getting better. They're not just trying to entertain or edutain me and the children. This is someone who is serious about developing themselves. So that's the kind of relationship I would encourage them to cultivate with other teachers, mentors, and experts. I would say choose an aspect of your collective provision. If you're going to work as a team, for example, choose an aspect of your collective provision and do some meaningful action research. So, for example, for the last 3 years, I've been working with a school in Antrim on oral reading fluency. And we sort of built a little community from there, and we're continuing to do that. And one of the teachers, Philip, is the main person who is the contact. And Philip and I presented at the Teen Conference in May, and we're going to do the same at the Literacy Association of Ireland Conference in December on oral reading fluency within Key Stage 2 in their school. The reason I'm citing this example is when somebody from a college and someone from a school stands up at a conference, having done some research together, I think that is a really good model for those who want to improve, to say, we should be doing this together. And then to talk about, well, how did we get together? What did we do when we got together? But somebody has to start that ball rolling. Somebody has to reach out. I would say if you're working as in Phillips School as a Key Stage 2 staff in particular, plan modestly. So if you are a new teacher coming in and you're going to be part of this, maybe keeping that eye as far as you can on planning modestly, and for a short period of time, maybe one semester, to really dip your toe in the pond and say, okay, I'm going to do readers, the oral reading fluency with the children, and we're going to discuss this on a regular basis, and we're going to gather data and analyze and discuss it, and then that'll help us plot the way forward. So that it's a very practical way of making the CPD come to life, grow legs, and go somewhere that's worth going to, as opposed to I'll do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then maybe I'll get back to my classroom and I might start something, or, oh, that's a glossy file I got and I must really look inside and see what that person was talking about. That rarely ever produces the goods. I would say as well, is maintain links with your peers. So you're just out of college and it can be a lonely sort of, oh my gosh, it's like a divorce. You had all of these friends and then suddenly they're all over the place. I would say maintain links with your peers who are new to the profession, but don't make it a complaining shop. Don't trauma bond. That's not a good thing, folks. Don't trauma bond over this is a dreadful school I'm in, and oh my gosh, all the children I've ever met are awful and the parents are don't do that, because you will be there for hours and weeks at a time with lots of things to complain about, but rather see it as a lifeline and try to develop yourselves by saying, okay, every time I call Kieran, I'm going to say, let's chat about something that went well this week. Let's chat about something that, I have an issue about. For example, before I came on here today, I popped into one of my colleagues and I said, these are some of the areas I'm thinking about discussing. Can you tell me, am I off the mark, or what else would I add? And so I really appreciated the feedback there. So, it's a good thing to maintain those links. So that's what I would kind of say. Don't be afraid to reach out to other people, no matter what their status. As long as you do it humbly and with some ideas and the willingness to work with whomever it is you have pinpointed as the person that might be useful to be in contact with.
I think that's great advice. I love the phrase trauma bond. I'm not sure love's the appropriate verb, but it's
and believe me, I
definitely.
can complain louder than the rest, Kieran, before anybody who watches or listens to this sends you emails going, is she for real? But it's checking yourself and going, okay, complaints over, what are we going to do? How are we going to move this juggernaut forward? Because it's a huge animal to move forward, but it's an exciting one.
So I really like the idea of starting your own sort of connect. You're almost like a PLC or sort of grassroots movement. I mean, you've got your group on Facebook, is that right? I mean, I haven't been on
Yes.
Facebook probably since I was at the college.
I'm old school, Kieran. Yes, it's the Science of Reading Northern Ireland Facebook page. And I have to say, we don't have an awful lot of interaction in the sense that, and that's good and bad. But what I do is I post nearly every day on it, and people can take what they want and leave what they like. And then from that, I go out into schools as well to build a research base. And so we have a little knot of teachers now that I've introduced to each other. So we're going to try and build that sort of face-to-face or, web community. And then we do book studies once a year. So, and then I get out to schools, and it's amazing that I get the best of both worlds, and hopefully they do in return too.
So if anyone's interested in literacy, they can join that, but also look to you for inspiration. I mean, am I right in thinking I'm going to butcher his name, Ryan Leshon? He moved from England to the north of Ireland. Has he started trying to get people together talking about reading in particular?
Well, he is on the SORNI Facebook page, and I have had private conversations with Ryan, which is fantastic. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. He's just completed his first year, I'm sure that was a bit of a shell shock to him to just, parachute his family over here, although his wife is from here, as far as I know. So yeah, Ryan is a great contact. I mean, he's really on fire with all of this. So yeah, again, I'm delighted he's in the group, and he's able to jump on sometimes to join us as well for the book study, which is great. So hopefully so this semester as well.
Nice. When I asked him to be on the podcast, he just had a child. And so hopefully one day, because he said he's just too busy. But like, I'm pretty sure Chris Such has a poster of Ryan on his bedroom wall. That kind of really looks up to him when he thinks about education and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, he is. He's a super. He's got a great mind, and yeah, for sure.
How can new and beginning teachers evaluate the impact of their CPD? And this has almost been a thread running through in different respects. But
Mm-hmm.
how do I go? Was that worth it, or
Yeah.
take some learning away from it?
Yeah, and the thing is, Kieran, as we know, when you are saturated with data, everything has to be measured, and you have to be able to stand over what you do. It's not sort of like, well, that's the way I do it, and like it or lump it. And I think rightly so, within reason. We have to evaluate the impact. What I would certainly say is stay close to the research base, so that you are aware of what is deemed effective practice in the first instance. As I say, I can be a very busy fool. I can put in days and weeks doing very little, but I'm exhausted by the end of it. And I think, well, what was that about? So I know third level often gets a bad rap, as in, oh, you research nerds, and unfortunately in the north of Ireland, and I hope I don't cause offence in saying this, but I do think that we, unlike America and Australia and New Zealand and places like that, I'm not quite sure about England or the UK in general, but we tend to have schools here and colleges here. And we meet when I do my undergraduate degree, and we meet if I do a postgraduate degree. And now and again, but not very often, if there's a bit of CPD, we might meet, but it's usually farmed out to other providers. And so the two really rarely mix outside of that. And I'm trying to bridge that gap. And I say to teachers when I meet, I say, folks, we need to be doing this together. And this old adage of, well, you're at the rock face in schools or the chalk face, and I'm in my ivory tower. Those are two really damaging things to say, because it negates what teaching is about. If I am at the match, I should be at my own rock face, doing my own teaching and research. And if you're in the classroom, you need to be reading or engaging with some kind of research. I'm not saying you'll be reading an encyclopedia every weekend of research. And this idea of we need to bring those two together so that we are both aware of, if I'm sending students out to schools and they're talking one language, and then they go out and see something else entirely different happening, which will happen, of course. But if we can bridge that gap, we have a better chance of our young people going into situations, leaving us and going into situations and coming back to us for continued development, where they have a common language and a fairly common experience in terms of, well, what is good research evidence-based practice? And so I would say that's really important. The research is really important. And saying that I'm in literacy, I mean, it's the loudest space for people yelling at each other about what's good and what's not good. So it's really important to have a good group in there to keep you on the right tracks. I would say read and listen to podcasts that put flesh on the bones of the theory that arises from the robust research field. So experiment with some of the tools. For example, assessments that maybe some of the big names, endorse for you to, again, I'll use oral reading fluency. So what kinds of measures qualitatively and quantitatively do you use to measure oral reading fluency, or to measure phonics, the progression in phonics? So it's about making sure that once you are reading the theory into practice books, you're listening to the podcast, listen to the people who can then say, okay, like in your podcast, Kieran, what does that mean in a classroom? What are the pitfalls? What are the misconceptions? And so I think that that is a really important follow-up. I would say with the other way of evaluating impact is with any of the initiatives or action research you begin, be sure to track the progress and collect the data. Because when you maybe see, upward trends in your data, your overall data, you might be saying, gosh, I wish I had been more attentive to the things I was doing, in the last semester or the last 2 years. And I have to say, with the school I'm working with in Phillips School, we're now starting to see trends lift in their standardized data. Now we can't say there's a causal link, but there's something going on piquing our curiosity because there's positive impact, and we need to dig into that. So that's really important. And lastly, I would say try to remain focused and true to what you have pinpointed that is in need of your attention. So that if you're going to evaluate, your phonics instruction or whatever it happens to be, then go for that. Or if you are, doing something in science and you say, right, let me really stay true to that. Because if you become splayed, very often you're too thinly stretched and you don't get the feedback of what's working, why is it working, or what's not working, and what do we need to do about that. So that's what I would tend to say about maybe from the outset, really looking at the impact.
Yeah, and I think it feeds into everything you've been saying about, this is a 30-year minimum journey, to get reasonably good at this very complex but rewarding job. So I think it makes a whole lot of sense in terms of your priorities from the outset, in terms of what would I have to get better at, because it can't be everything all at once. And then how am I going to evaluate that when it's been really focused on what I was trying to do, because then after 5 years, you might feel comfortable teaching. And after 10 years, you might feel like you're half decent at it, And that's the way we got to approach these things, I think.
Yeah. And it should actually become the kind of thing where if you're right for the job and the job is right for you and you've been working together to make it, to raise this baby, it should feel like, it is the thing that makes you jump out of bed in the morning, because it really saddens me when I see on some social media platforms where people are just so distressed and then they yell at each other. And I'm thinking, this is not what teaching was supposed to be. This is not what teaching was supposed to be. And so it's really important to keep that sense of proportion about it, because as you say, 30 years at least. And the way the pensions are going, it could be 40 years. Or more.
Yeah. Oh no, let's not go there. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I know that experienced and new teachers alike will have a lot to take away from this episode. I really appreciate you giving me your time this afternoon, and yeah, thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure. And Kieran, just if I could make one or two closing remarks, because I think, it's easy for us to get into the weeds about, the curriculum and all of that. I would say to any young person, and I say it all the time, is remain curious and questioning about your profession, even in the face of overwhelm. I mean, if this is the job for you and you've pursued a healthy and balanced love of, as I say, what makes you jump out of bed in the morning, it's important to say to yourself, if that is not the case, am I in this field for the right reason? Or have I allowed myself to get carried along without really paying attention to my true feelings of my daily, day-to-day life in this profession? Am I in this work because I don't know what else to do? And that's a very real conundrum for a lot of people. It's like a family business. I'm from a teaching family. I don't know what else to do. And if this is the case, seek professional advice to help you make an informed decision. There's life after teaching if it's not for you, because nobody wins in that situation, no matter how much CPD you seek out. If it's not right for you. And I would say the last two things is actively build your resilience. Now that's easier said than done, because resilience is built in the face of adversity. You don't need to be resilient when things are jogging along nicely. It's when you get pummeled with something that you need that resilient muscle is exercised. But what I would say is confide in good colleagues and friends and family in the event of, having a bad day, having a bad week, and know when to judge, that it's not going to be CPD that is going to help me here. It's if this isn't for me. And finally, you don't have to be perfect to be a perfectly good teacher. Accept that, you are where you are, but you're doing something about it actively and consistently. Because if you don't, you'll set yourself up for a very unhappy and unattainable career, and that's not what teaching's about.
I think that's the perfect way to round things off. And I think that, yeah, if everyone goes in with that mindset, then both they and their children will get a better deal.
I thank God every day I get into teaching now. Everybody I've taught may not feel the same way, but I really do. I mean, it has given me a lot more than I could have ever wanted, and it is the best legal high you will get when you go from that sort of I'm jogging along, surviving to the children have actually learned something. And I can see now, I have the data here, and I don't mean as in cold data, but I can see that they've truly learned, and we haven't had to do a big pantomime act to get to the learning. It's happened, and that's the best feeling in the world.
And everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.